whole slew of pirate jokes. So if we're finding a lull, just be prepared for that. But I guess how much does a pirate pay to get their ears pierced?
How much?
About $1 an ear.
Very good.
Great to see you, lady.
What's a pirate's favorite letter?
R.
You'd think.
R.
Actually, the C.
That's how you get a webinar going with a few kroners.
That's right. That's right. What is 8 arms, 8 legs, and 8 eyes? 8 pirates. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, everyone. I'm sorry.
You're great.
Hi, I'm Gary.
Yes, we got it.
Okay.
Kick on. Nichelle Rogers.
Good to see you.
Are we on?
Thanks for coming.
Okay, we're recording. Great. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Can we go to the next slide? We're going to go ahead and get started with September's Public Sector Change Practitioners webinar. And I'm very excited for what we have on our agenda today. We're going to start with some housekeeping. You're controlling. Can we go to the special things? Okay. Back 2 slides. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so really important. We have a great team here at CDOT that helps make all of this possible. And really, this is a team of interns, and they've got a ton of other things on their plates. But it really wouldn't be possible without them. And so I want to make sure Alex today is our, he's not in the shop, but Alex is our producer and has really helped make this happen. Vivian hopefully will be here at some point today. She's been through the entire process and is one of our experts in how to make this happen.
She should be there anytime.
Yeah, yay. And then Shalise is new to the team, and she's also just jumped right in and been a great help. And then Niles, who's here to my right, is also helping make sure that this gets recorded, and then they will all also get it online so that the stuff can be available, the recording and the deck. So, so big, huge thanks to them. And if you are asking questions, or for our presenters as well, you'll have to mute and unmute yourself as you come on the line. And the little mute button is there in the corner. This is for the last few webinars. We have been doing this, Claire Anderson, Michelle, Malloy, and myself, Megan, we've been leading this effort to really bring some consistency to our community of practice and make sure that we're delivering some webinars. And hopefully we also have a website that we're going to get to introduce today. And then we just want to continue to grow that stability within the community. And I know make sure that we're reaching out to all of the different parts of the country that are participating in this with us. Michelle, would you like to speak to this?
Sure, and I was going to say it's not just the country, it's the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, we really want to make sure we're reaching out to everyone around the world that's a member, and to get more and more people involved so that we can all learn more and more from each other. Our purpose of the whole community of practice is really to learn from one another, and overarching is to ensure everybody impacted by change is successful with that change. And however we go about that, there's many different ways. And so that's what we want to share here are those ways. Very agnostic, very, we just want to share that, especially with everybody in the public sector.
Mm-hmm. And that leads really well into this quote that I found by Charles Darwin, an expert in change. And this idea that it's not the strongest or the most intelligent who will survive, but those who can best manage change And so it's really speaking to that idea of being adaptable, and that's essentially what we're doing, is not just making sure that our organizations and the people in them can thrive, but really be on the forefront of what's happening next and be ahead of that curve so that we can survive in this rapidly changing world. Something that I always like to make sure that you all as members feel and know how much we value your voice, and we want to make sure that you're participating, that this community is not just this team here at CDOT, it's not just our board of directors, but it's really it's you all that make it possible. It's particularly our presenters. I always want to extend such gratitude to them. And so yes, so welcome. And we're going to get started today with Nancy Richards, who is coming to us from Seattle in information technology. We have a fun second section today, which is actually a panel. And on our panel today is going to be Michelle, Justin, Nichelle, who we've heard from in the past, and then Nancy, of course, who's here today. At the end, we'll do our open forum. We have a couple announcements, and then we'll finish up today. So, Nancy, if you want to go ahead and request control, then you can jump right in.
Great, thanks so very much. I appreciate the time, and I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak to everyone that's here. And so I am, my roots are change management. However, my current role is really to run the Seattle IT Business Analyst team. And I want to talk to you a little bit today about how we have integrated change management into that practice and what's happening with that. So I have requested control, and it is not moving forward for me. There we go. So one of the things that started out, if I can walk us through this, and if anybody has questions or comments, I'm just going to kind of let you know what the state of our organizational design is. We have the project management office within IT, and originally they had the business analyst located in that group. We've now separated them out. The services that are offered are listed there, and you'll see that 3 of those 4 are different colored. Those 3, business analyst services, organizational change management, and business process redesign, are all offered by the business analysts. And so that was one of the compelling reasons for us to move them out. We are a product of a recently consolidated IT, so we've taken the distributed model where each of the departments, some 32 different departments in the city, had their own IT business analysts, and all of the things that went with that. And we've consolidated that, and so our services now are being, I'll say, refined and standardized, which is what we're going to be talking about here. When we went through the consolidation, you'll see that there's several different identifying pieces. Each of those top level documents or events are things that talked about why we needed to consolidate. You'll notice there's underlined items in each of those, and those are all change management. Each one of the internal audits or strategic agendas talked about the need for change management as part of our service offering for the business within IT. And so it was a very compelling, easy argument, if you want to say that, for our leaders to buy in and to support organizational change management as a standard deliverable for our IT projects. As we went through each of these, moving forward, this is our stage gate process, and that really is how a project lifecycle goes through its approval. We have an idea, a strategic plan within the business, different things that happened with that. And our business analysts, when I came aboard, really were only playing in one area. And so they were very limited in what they could do, and that didn't bode well for effective change management. As a result of that, we made some changes. I joined the organization October a year ago, and that's when we really started to develop the standard deliverables for our business analysts, which include organizational change management. As you see here, it actually starts before even the strategic piece. That means that our business analysts are now true consultants to help organizations, our business organizations, determine what is their strategic plan. And in that strategic plan, what is the impact of that to their business, to all of their staff? You'll notice that it goes beyond into production support. And that means, how do we organizationally build this in so that we can have a sustainable change, moving out of just a project status into a full-on supported change within the organization. This is huge in the impact. We had never done this before. And it's been very effective for our business. Our business partners have really enjoyed and appreciated this level of support, and they are very anxious to have this happen for them. Our business analysts have 4 core services that we provide, building on standards. Again, after a consolidation, we had a wide diversity in people's, I'll say, knowledge and or skill sets, and some people were called business analysts when they really didn't have some of the standard underpinnings. And you can see that, of course, change management is one of the 4 pillars, as we call them, moving these forward. We're using the Washington State has a lean model, and King County, which we are part of, one of the larger counties in the United States, we are following that same model because they offer free training and because we are an agency that we can work with them. And as we do interagency work, it just makes sense for us to be able to speak the same language. And then we talk about performance metrics and the things that we do there to document how much are we moving forward. For those of us who do change management, we recognize that all of these are really kind of integrated, and to separate them out as separate services, it's a little different for us. However, for the business, and because we're delivering this through the business analysts, it's very easy for them to see how we play well together and how they can have this service stitched into their project. One of the things that we are now moving into is actually, rather than having a software or an upgrade or something that we're doing as our call, we are now to the point that we are offering some of these services as a standalone, which means we no longer have to have a IT project to be the carrying mechanism for these services. That has just started, and we call it concept consultation, and the business is absolutely over the moon. That also means that we may not have a project manager. It may all be professional services that the business analyst team bring forward, which might be just organizational change management. It might be looking at some processes and what needs to be improved or modified. And of course, along with that comes some change management. So it's a really nice way to be able to present this to the business. This is when I came aboard last October. I provided to our then CTO and my boss, who is the director of the PMO or project management team, which includes the BAs as a separate group now. I said, this is our maturity model. This is what we can offer year 1. And we had 20 FTEs, and we had a lot of, a TLT is a temporary or limited term temporary, and that is, and then we had a number of contractors. My goal then is to move to more FTEs and fewer TLTs. You notice there's a little bit of a bubble that's happening towards 2018, the end of that. And then you'll see the beginning of 2019, this is budget time. So we have put in for the number of permanent staff. This is, again, a little bit of a hangover from the consolidation. In business, people would have an analyst or a business analyst, and they would have very lumpy project. We're all projects, that's all we do. So it's a much higher watermark, which is the justification for having FTEs versus the TLT. And you'll see next year, we have put in for that conversion of some of our TLT staff. Moving this forward, then we will grow and just fit demand based upon what happens in those staff. You'll see that in white in the number 5 maturity block, my byline is that I want to be the service partner of choice. Our business departments do have choices. They can go out to vendors or contractors. They don't need to use the staff that we have in IT. And it has been something that they've done because of a lack of trust or a lack of understanding of what we have. We have been able to demonstrate that we can deliver the services that they want, including the change management, which is one of the things that they like best. Their people feel prepared and ready for a change. And that has been really very well embraced by all of our business partners. This is kind of the detailed model, and I won't drag you through all of that, except I do want to walk through the organizational change management track. And you'll see that in 2018, we're going to train 50% of the, 50% of the PM staff along with the BA team. And we have all the leaders that have already gone through that. So I have between now and the end of the year to make sure that I am hitting that metric, and we are well on our way. The wonderful thing is the amount of sponsorship that I have. My boss, who's the director, turned around and said, look, I want you to front load this. Instead of doing just 50%, I want you to get at least 70%, 75% in this year. So I think November and December is going to be a pretty busy training month on the things that we're working forward. You'll notice then in 2019, it moves forward, and we want to have our BA staff be able to lead the OCM individually so that they can be that team that brings in that particular work stream. And you'll notice that in 2020, we go into including OCM in 80% of all of our IT projects. That is a pretty high expectation. However, the way that it's going now and the way that it has been adapted from our leadership all the way through, it looks like we're well on our way for that. And then by 2021, we want to make sure that it's just a standard offering, and we won't deliver any projects that have an impact to our staff without having that level of OCM included. And again, I'm trying to get my slides to cooperate. And we highlighted through that. Terrific. So here are some of the standard offerings that we give in each of the 4 pillars. And this is just an example. It's not meant to be an exhaustive list, but you'll notice that there's a lot of things. Again, is stating that just like that illustration of the 4 pillars, this lets us see, well, what is it that I can offer? We just finished a brochure that has many of this types of information so that our business can look at it and then say, well, I don't really understand what performance metrics is, or what is organizational change management, and what do I really do with this, and how do I work together? And so we have what in the commercial world might be looked at as account managers. We have client service directors that work with the business to help them align what their business needs are for IT, and this has been a really good communication tool for them to be able to use. When we talked about 2018, they said it was the year of execution. We said, no, not so much. This is going to be the year of implementation. And there's a little difference if you think from the IT world, I'm going to build or execute a plan. What I'm really going to do is implement. And that implement is a much broader embracing of the people, preparation, readiness, sustaining in the business. And so I have a community of practice that I lead for my business analysts now. There's 40-some staff that attend that. And every month we have a 90-minute meeting, and we talk about the various things in our maturity model. Last month in August, we did race and social justice toolkit so that we can understand how do we integrate that into our business process. And now this month, we just had our community of practice last week, and it was one of 2 months series on developing performance metrics, moving away from just counting activities into measuring outcomes. And how do we do that with the business? How do we help them self-declare and identify what are the right types of metrics for the initiatives that we are supporting? This is really what we like to call the money slide. This is what we do. That green area is we want to decrease that transition time and increase employee productivity during the transition. And that's what we want to be able to help. And we want to qualify and quantify how we can make that difference. When we talk about creating a culture of sustainability, I'm having to do that internally in IT, across all of IT, not just in the BAs, and I'm doing that in the business. And so what we see is that I have to understand what the strategic plan is. We now have team members who are supporting our, and you'll love this, our Department of Transportation, Seattle DOT. They're actually doing some work with the Colorado DOT, and thank you very much for the partnership. We appreciate that. That's one of the great things of having our user group can provide, is they have not had an IT strategic plan. They've had one for building roads and sidewalks and all of these other great things that they do, but they haven't really taken it into looking at what are the capabilities that I need to have for the next 3, 5, 10 years, and we're helping them develop that. And then we'll have the performance metrics, and we'll look at all of the other things that we know need. You'll notice that we have that functional capability and or capacity. Those are the things that we build in. Again, this is another way to talk about the 4 pillars and how we build a culture that's ready to accept change. Here are some of the things. These are why we do what we do. We get gold stars, and the gold stars from our business are what they say about us, and that is that we just want to let you know that your team did an amazing job. It was very useful information, and I've never seen a project like this completed in such a short time. I understand that this is new, and I just want to say thank you for being such a great partner. These are words that we have not heard now we're entering into year 3 of the consolidation. We've had people who've been very upset at the fact that we stole their people, we stole their autonomy, we stole everything for the consolidation, and now they're actually seeing some benefit. They're seeing that we can deliver something that formally they might have had to go to a contractor, they might have had to go to a consultant, and now they can go to their people internally, and they can call out and get exactly what they need, and they're happy about it. It's also more cost effective, which makes us all a little happy. Some of the other things that we hear are our team is finally working together. We're now aligned and see the bigger picture. Again, change management, helping people understand why are they doing what they're doing? How does it connect to the bigger goal? Going back to that, how do I create the culture? And we're looking at the feedback that people have. They're very, very happy. Even in the teams, as we're building the combined teams between business and IT, and it was really great. We talk about it in change management that one of the things that happen in the ProSci model, they talk about the red band, and that's that flight risk model. Here, because we're able to help people feel connected, they understand what their success model is, and they're staying on the job. That's huge when we can have that kind of satisfaction for people on teams. So it's been a year. Here's what's worked. Building high-performing team. One of the things that's been great is I've had people who have come into our community of practice. This last week we had somebody who does performance metrics for the city, and because I wanted them to see what we're doing and align with it, and they said to one of my team members, they said, is this what your VA community practice meeting is like all the time? And they said, oh yeah, we do this every month. This is really good. She says, oh my God, we need to do this everywhere. Everybody needs to do this. This is so cool. And it's because people are learning together. They're building this together. They see the evidence of what they're doing. It isn't me doing it. It's them doing it. And it's awesome to see how we are able to do that. I have been able to create that vision, but I've got great sponsorship behind me, and they help this move forward. And it's really wonderful to have that kind of support and sponsorship. It is one of the things that we're working on in Seattle. You might have heard we've had 4 mayors last year. We've also had a few other things that have changed. And so what will help us is when we get that leadership stability and people can help us move forward. Those are the things that we're hoping for as we go forward. I want to say thank you. I love telling my story. I'm really proud of our people. let me know if there's anything that I can further answer or if there's any questions. But thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Nancy. I am so impressed with how all of the pieces you've been able to integrate and all of the people and being able to help them feel empowered. And it's a big reason why I think we all love this work, is that we see that it actually makes people happier and more successful in the work that they do. So, so great example of that. I'm looking to the chat pane if there's any questions.
Yeah, feel free to go ahead and chat your questions into the chat pane, or feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question for Nancy. We do have one question that came through. One participant was really intrigued by your race and social justice toolkit. It sounds like a really interesting lessons learned opportunity, and they're wondering if you'd be able to share more, potentially either how you implemented it or maybe how you're going to use it, leverage it in the future.
I'd be happy to point you in the right direction, or someone here that you could talk about. We have that. We have a very high focus on equity and social justice in our organization within the City of Seattle. And so one of the things that our teams have developed, not my team, but that group has developed, is really a toolkit. And that toolkit is something that we can apply to a project. And it looks at things. One of the very interesting components, just to give a quick scenario, we have claims when there is a broken pipe, a broken sewer pipe or water main or something, and those claims all seem to come from certain geographic areas in the city. And they noticed that there were not very many claims where they knew there had been a lot of flooding, broken pipes, something that was happening, and they were in an economically depressed portion of the city, which they wanted to make sure that they were able to understand what was going on. They realized there were a number of things. Most of the people there, English was not their first language. It was a high rental rather than ownership population. And a lot of the people didn't know that they could even call the government, that they could call the city and say, hey, this pipe is out in the street leaking into my basement and I've got flooding and it's not pretty water. I need some things fixed. They had no idea how to do that. Leveraging the toolkit allowed us to pinpoint what were some of the root causes, and then to mitigate that by providing better communication, multi-language communication, and being able to target how are we providing the best service to all of our constituents, rather than just those who are, I'll say, more informed or have better idea of how to address a specific need. So that toolkit allows us to analyze and synthesize data and information and processes so that we are able to better support offering the good services that we offer to all of our constituents, all of our citizens.
Perfect, thank you. We do have a couple other questions, a couple broad asks of whether or not the slide deck and the webinar will be made available. So absolutely, we are going to make sure that you all get a downloaded deck as well as the recorded webinar available to you. So be looking for that resource post-webinar today, or at some point post today. We did have another question come in looking more for information about the community of practice in general. She was asking how it was started up, how we are maintaining buy-in, how we're producing it, any best practices. I don't know, Michelle might be a good resource for that to jump in as well.
Well, Michelle probably knows a little bit more about how the background of it and how it first got started. We had already been doing a community of practice called the Transportation Lean Forum, and that grew pretty organically. It just started a few people, you know, in a meeting and sharing ideas, and they thought, wow, this is something that we could all really benefit from, and they started kind of doing a regular meeting and inviting more people, and then so we kind of recognized at CDOT the what it took to produce that forum, and we had written a lot of standards of work around that, and you know, after each one we do our after actions review and improve those, and so so we were able to apply that information to this community of practice, which had already had a following and a distribution list, and I think Michelle could speak more to that piece of it. And then at this point, we're just really trying to listen to our members in terms of getting those surveys out and finding out who's interested in presenting, what are the kind of things you're interested in hearing, how can we, with essentially volunteers, how can we provide some consistency around what we're offering.
And I think, though, that Nancy also has a community practice, right, at Seattle, like within the city itself.
Exactly. And so I'm, in my former lives, different places, I've always had a community of practice. And that community of practice that I put on is for my staff. I do invite other people who come along, either as guest speakers or because we've got a topic like we did this last week, which was for performance metrics. So we bring someone in, and the week before, or the month before, I'm sorry, we did a much broader training for the toolkit as I talked about it. So
you do it monthly?
We do it monthly. And it's,
okay.
We started out being 60 minutes and everybody complained that it wasn't long enough. And so I have now been asked to do a specific one, in addition to the business analyst, to do a specific one on change management, which is, before I was in the IT department, I was in the public utilities, and I did change management there, and they want me to start that up again. The interest is there because we make it meaningful. The people want to know how to do this better. They want to know how to sustain it. They want to hear from one another. They need the encouragement. And it is, at this point, my personal metric for success is somewhere, I'd like to have 70% attendance. And that's pretty high for any user group or community of practice. And so far, we've been able to hold and sustain in excess of 85%. And that, we take people who are out on PTO or out sick or something, we take them off the list for obvious reasons. But those who are available, and there we've had in excess of 85% attendance for over a year. So I think if the content is good and is meaningful and it provides value, staff prioritize it, and it has been really, really fun to be able to do.
Awesome. Well, we don't have any other questions right now, so if you have, feel free to jump in and unmute yourself, and we can answer some other questions. Otherwise, I might hand things back over to Megan.
Oh, those are all just additional slides that are at the appendix, so they're there.
Yeah, thank you. That'll be available to us for later. So we generated some questions from one of the surveys early on that we sent out, asked about the topics that you all are interested in. And as our presentations have been organized up until this point, it's really based on our fine members who are willing to come in and present and have presentations and time that they can make available to do this. And so at this point, our presentations have not really been able to align with some of those topics that were mentioned in that survey. What is exciting about us bringing this panel in today is that we pulled questions from those topics that we know that there's interest in, and hopefully we'll be able to address that through this panel. And I'm just going to kind of let them introduce themselves, tell a little bit about their background. We've heard from Nancy, so if we can start with Nichelle, and then we'll let Nichelle, who is here with us today, introduce herself, and then Justin, and then we'll jump right into our questions. So Nichelle, if you want to give us a little bit of background about your experience.
So I'm Nichelle Malloy, and I work at the Colorado Department of Transportation. I'm the Senior Program Manager for Change Management and Strategy at CDOT. And I've been doing change management for about 6 or 7 years now. And we started the program back well, and that's my background in change management. I also do program management, project management, performance, all of that stuff. It all comes together and it all flows together and interconnects. So that's kind of what I do at CDOT.
Thank you, Michelle. We'll let Nichelle jump in if we're not.
Don't do the extreme close-up.
No, not closer.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for inviting me again back. I work with the Department of Interior, Office of Natural Resources Revenue. I've been there for over 19 years, and I always tell a joke. I started when I was 9, in case you're trying to guess how old I am. But I've been doing communication and change management at Honor, I think since, I don't remember, 2012. It's a gray area. I can't remember when I actually started. I'm actually picking up performance here next week. So that's just one more hat to wear. But I'm happy to be here. I met Michelle at the ACMP conference earlier this year. So I was excited about what CDOT was doing. I said, I need to be a part of this. I need to come and join you guys and listen in and learn from you and share. So again, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. All right, Justin.
Well, good morning, everyone. Justin here from Chicago. Yes, British accent for anyone wonders. Basically, I've worked in IT all my background and really in private sector. I'm now the practice director of a change management organization in Chicago, a company called the William Everett Group. And, you know, we've done a lot of public sector projects, and currently I'm working on a project which is to engage the 2.7 million residents of Chicago around a new 3-on-1 solution that's being implemented. And it's fascinating trying to talk to that many people and work across so many organizations at a city level and at a residential level. In terms of my background, started out business analyst, kind of stayed up in the IT career, ended up being country CIO for Microsoft in the UK, and then came out to Seattle to be part of a startup marketing organization. We called it a marketing IT organization, but we would call it change management today, because we realized that we weren't very good at talking about technology, even to our own work, to our own employees at Microsoft. So we built out a change management practice, and a lot of what Nancy was saying is a lot of the things we had to do. And as a result, I became a kind of a change management fan since 2006, and I've gone on to be ProSci certified, and then done various kind of global leadership roles in change management subsequently.
Great, thank you so much, Justin. So this is going to be pretty informal. We've got some questions, and we're just going to let our panelists jump in where they feel like they have some strengths and expertise. First question. What, in your view, is the most important part of change management?
I'm going to jump in. So I think, I mean, there's many different aspects of change management that are so important to be successful. But I think one of the biggest ones, in my opinion, is having good, solid foundation and relationships with everybody that you're working with everybody you're talking to, with everybody that, works for you throughout the organization. Having those strong relationships and those connections, I think, is so vital to being successful.
I'll go next. For me, it was not just having senior management buy-in, but actually having them understand what they're buying into. Some people just go ahead and go along with the majority, and they don't really know what they're getting themselves into. And then once they're in it, they get scared or they flip out and they no longer want to be a part of it. And so I'm making sure they understand from the beginning, part of that foundation, what's happening and why they're agreeing to what we're asking them to agree to.
And I might piggyback on that and say that I think it's having a vision, being able to translate that vision to all of the above, everyone at every level, especially the leadership, so that the leaders understand what it is that they need to do. Again, data as well as relationship.
Yeah, and I jump in on that too. I'm going to kind of talk tactically, but I think you've really got to know your audience almost before you
Yep.
start engaging with your audience. So I think I 100% agree with data. I mean, as a person who's been in the technology space, pretty much data and technology is like the air you breathe in the company now. So there's lots of it, right? So you can look at how people are using technology by application. You can look at help desk, and then there's really influential people like administrative staff, or the kind of the key people that people go to. Again, kind of BA type work, but I think there's a lot of analytics you can do about your audience before you even start engaging them. And I think that's also helpful because it's something like turning up and saying, yeah, this is what I already believe I know about you, rather than, tell me who you are. I know nothing. And then externally, I think some things that are very important. If there is some kind of satisfaction survey that's done with any kind of rigor or rhythm, dial into that, or maybe even initiate that. I think, peer change management networks like this one are just phenomenal, and particularly across an organizational context. Find whoever else is in the change management business, work out what works, what doesn't work, when it's showing up, when it isn't showing up, the extent of the impact, what's the history around change management, and then also fundamentally, how does your project make a difference, right? So what's the alignment of your project to the strategic goals of the entity and to your customers, partners outside of that entity that you're serving, and what's the messaging associated with that? Because I think it's very important you want to anchor to that and bring that into your project, so that your context is part of the bigger picture. It's not just the sale of your unique project.
Great, thank you. Let's move on to this next question. How do you learn about and track employees' perspectives / reactions before, during, and after the change?
I think it depends on the actual change itself. And it depends on what groups it's impacting, I think, are the most effective ways to track this. For example, at CDOT, you might send a survey out to the engineering side of the house if it's a change that's impacting engineering. If it's a maintenance change that's impacting people that are actually working in the field all the time that don't have a lot of computer access, you've got to come at it a different way. And then being able to gauge how they think about it before, during, and after, I think takes a lot of in-person two-way communication. At CDOT, we employ the Change Agent Network to go out and talk to the managers and supervisors of the people being impacted and bringing that feedback back up to the project team. So we try to have as much in-person two-way communication as possible instead of just surveys or just things like that. So we want to just kind of fill it out.
We do very much the same thing, and that is to, again, once we've got an initiative, we talk about what would success look like to our leaders, whether that's the sponsors or the sponsor coalition, and say, what do you want to have change? What would you see as an earmark of success? And then we look at understanding from what it currently is so that they can start to highlight, because things often change just 1 degree at a time, and we just kind of go along and then we don't really look at what that looks like. So we want very much to cause that contrast and compare so they can both anticipate and look for what's going to happen. And so we start by setting expectations, and we'll do that all the way through. So again, if we're working with the crew chief, we'll ask them, what do you think success might look like and how would that show up? And that could be at the executive level all the way through, and then at an individual level. We try and do as much communicating directly with our staff. We're widely dispersed and distributed and have lots of different schedules. We're not all in what they call us, the tower people. And so it means we have to be in the field. We have to be where our people are and have those conversations with them. And we do create a scorecard. And so we'll look at a scorecard that might talk about what behaviors, what's the frequency, what would happen next. And then we look at having a confidence factor. And we actually will do a confidence survey. Sometimes that is a standard survey, and sometimes that's just an in-person interview.
So along with those items, I know we're a much smaller organization. We have about 600. We might actually be lower than 600 right now because of budgets changing and people retiring. But sometimes our water cooler conversations have been pretty interesting, and I feel like we get more information from the water cooler talk than from the surveys themselves. I've noticed in our organization, the surveys, I think people are still nervous about their name being attached to data and information, and so they're hesitant to really share the real feeling. And then when you go, you know, and I continue to have this argument with leadership to say, they're like, oh, well, scores are great. I said, yeah, but if you go and actually talk to people, it's not what the score is reflecting. So how do we address that? And then we end up having some of those other conversations. So that water cooler talk is an amazing input into the process.
Yeah.
Did we lose Justin?
No, I think Justin's still there. But did you want to add to that? Okay, let's go ahead and look at our next question. This question we inevitably get in our chat every webinar, so we wanted to make sure to include it. And I'm guessing even with the information, it'll continue to be something that's unclear for people. But how do you engage sponsors throughout the entire process, from gaining support to giving feedback?
Other person. For honor, it's been first kind of demonstrating and helping them understand, going back to that, how they fit into the change, how it will affect their teams, how they can contribute towards the process. I feel like they take a lot more ownership when they see themselves in it. But the big part is, you know, if they don't come to you, you got to go to them. You know, you have to go and be in front of them. I like to do it in person. The email, the phone call, sometimes it's just not as personable, and they feel less of a pressure to commit or to, you know, at least hear you out. And so I like to go in person and let them see my face and see how serious I am about getting them on board.
I try and make sure that every time that I have a meeting with a sponsor, that I give them something. I give them something that is useful for them. I never have them, well, I won't say never. I rarely have them come to me. I'm always trying to go to them. I also want to make sure that I give them, and then if I have an ask, it's that reciprocity. They feel a little more beholden to try and give it to us. I want them to see that I am there to provide them with both strategic and tactical information, data, gold stars, whatever it is that they need. I want to give that to them so that they recognize that it is an advantage for them to have the work that we're providing for them, for their teams. It's a net gain for them. They feel that it is a positive experience and that what they gain is something that they would have been losing out had they not engaged with us.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I think there's a what's in it for them, absolutely. Yep. But equally, I kind of make them visible. So I kind of, you know, make their responsibility visible. You might put in brackets, name and shame, right? For those that aren't, you know, and I've seen it kind of create some kind of, you know, a good level of competition internally as well, because people want to be on the table and be seen to supporting that. That said, in my recent kind of introduction to public sector, I had a very interesting conversation with a guy, chief of staff for a ward, for an alderman in a ward, and he was talking about the political answer and kind of the organizational answer. And I know maybe we can get into that another time around public sector, but that seemed kind of a blunt knife or a sharp knife. I wasn't sure what I was dealing with. Maybe that's a topic for another day. But basically, yeah, look to kind of make them visible and share their contribution and help drive, like you were talking, Nancy, I think about gold stars, like make them feel like they're part of success.
Yeah, exactly. They get so much stuff, I'll just say, dumped on them, that anytime they can get some gold stars, some appreciation, it's really valuable.
Yeah, it is. I completely agree. With my sponsors, I try to involve them as early as possible in everything that I'm doing. And in fact, I have a sponsor meeting right after the community of practice today. So, so early and often, all the time, keeping them involved and making sure that I show my appreciation for them for staying involved. And I try to make things as easy as possible for them. I guide them and say, I need you to do this or this or this, but I make sure it's all taken care of for them so they can just go and do it quickly, with as least, fuss and muss about it.
Great, thank you. I love hearing that kind of positive feedback that the sponsors are getting, and I know that that can help resolve even a lot of areas where they may be falling short, if you can demonstrate that you're there to remove roadblocks and to help them out with that. But I do want to kind of circle back to that in terms of if you have a sponsor that you feel like really isn't meeting the need, how do you address that?
I loved Justin's comment about naming and shaming. I think being able to have a scorecard, which is what we rely on for especially sponsor meetings or steering committees, is to let them know how well are they doing. And here's the expectation, who's meeting that need and what do they need to do next? And was it on time? How are we holding them to the same level of accountability that we're holding everybody else on the team? And what happens if they don't do that?
Great, thank you. Let's look at what is one thing that members could do tomorrow to improve their change efforts.
There isn't one thing. Sorry, I jumped, so I'm going to take the first answer here, but I've got others. I think everyone should set an aspiration for the C-level change management role, right? I think we should all become the chief continuous change officers, right? Or I kind of make a joke of it, the C3O, right? That's how important I see our role. That's how I think you should see your aspiration for the future. Ladies?
I agree. I think that it's setting that vision. What does good look like all the way around and why? I think that's it, and it's the risk of not doing it. And I just think casting that, which is what a 3C would do.
Yeah, I think the vision is being able to paint that picture of what the future looks like to the different levels within the organization. I mean, that you might have to change language a little bit, but you're still going to be painting that picture throughout the organization. And I think that alone is probably one of the most important things to get everybody filling the roles that they need to be filling, and doing everything that they can to help the changes be implemented.
I think one of the things that I've heard is that people look at what we're doing with change management and they're seeing it as leadership. One of the things that we are helping our leaders do is be better leaders, because they have not always been able to articulate their vision or have clarity around that. And I think that's where it shows up in working with our leadership, is to help them articulate and communicate consistently that vision.
So I'm going to take a little bit different road for a response to this answer. One of the things that has been beneficial to me, because I have such a small staff, I have 5 people on my team, and only 1 is dedicated outside of myself to change management. And then we have folks across the organization. We have about 65 or 70 related to diversity and inclusion. But the big thing for me is to have a sustainable energy source for the change initiative, because it's so draining sometimes, especially if you don't see that change happening or people jumping on board the way that you want them to jump on board. Having, whether it's an employee association, morale boosting group, you know, a community of practice like this, having someone or some group to be that sustainable energy throughout that project has been so amazing. You know, that's a big piece for me.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree, and I apologize. Maybe I went for the moonshot initially with my dialogue, but I think there's a bunch of things we do. We've kind of broken out from just being project resources to now being acknowledged competency, if not a capability, right? But there are other things I feel that we are the advocate for, right? Like, change management is no longer just change management. We think about experience management, right? We think about our recipient or user's journey, and it's not just the thing we're changing, it's the things to the left and right of that. And how does that influence their experience and the outcome we want them to be able to achieve, right? And I think others have said, like, how do you start with the mindset, which is, how do you make this thing the easiest it can be to absorb, right? And that's tough. You've got to have pretty tough skin to have that dialogue with the project team, right? Again, it's a bit like BA work, but you've got to be the not just the voice out. You need to be the voice in on behalf of your user. Right, and that's part of your role. That's one of the badges, we will give you as a practice, but that's something you need to do for your audience, right? Because a project team won't get that.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. And can you describe a time that a change effort was not succeeding and how you addressed this challenge?
Take a time.
I always hate talking about the ugly stuff, right? We had a particular project right now that I'm involved in, and I won't give any details on it other than it's the change management lead is new in their role. The project manager is having some difficulties. They are abdicating what they are doing to the vendor. And so the first thing that I did was identify who are the sponsors, gave them data about what's happening and what did we need to do. Part of that was to add extra support staff around the new change management lead. And so we did that immediately. The next thing that we did was to engage we have a PDA, project quality team member. And so that person did an assessment on what was happening, and it was all around organizational change management. And so we took that data and went to the sponsors, the internal IT sponsors, not so much to the business, and said, here's the challenge that we're having, and this is what's the outcome of this. This is what the behavior is. And even this morning before, we're an hour earlier than my friends in Colorado, I had already had a meeting about this particular project, and it's on what we call our boil list. And so daily stand-ups, it's what's happening, where's it going, and that's with the executive sponsors. So we are all about supporting it. It's not about people on the team not doing, it's about how can we help you get there? What is it that we need to augment, and how can we support moving into the success, which is a big difference. It used to be that it was, well, clearly the project manager is doing a bad job, or this is happening as bad, and that's not, change them out, flip this out, do something. Now it's much more about what are our processes and how can we augment and support that individual or that team to be more successful.
I know it's really hard to talk about the projects. I want to say it was about 4 years ago, we had a project, and this was our second attempt at the project. So the first attempt had failed. It had just crashed and burned, and it didn't get implemented. There was too much resistance in the organization. So they waited, an obligatory so many months, and they started the project again, renamed it, did some different things to it. And this is when change management was very new to CDOT. So there was no change management involved in this project from the beginning again. And the second time around, they went through a process improvement event. They were getting down to the wire. And I think they were about 3 months before implementation, and they realized that they didn't have change management. And so it was one of those situations, where you like to integrate like this and be, from the very beginning. It was one of those, okay, let's get it all in at the end. And we did. We got it all in at the end. But it was very, what I call, it was just a real rush to get it done. And so it could have been done better, but I'm happy to report that it was actually successful in the end. And within 6 months of implementation, they were at like 90% of the people doing the process. So even if we do come in at the end, we can save it, and we can help people adjust and adopt those changes. So that's kind of the one that always sticks in my mind.
I think one opportunity is to involve your least technical parent. So a little bit of context. It's 2008 at Microsoft. We're about to deploy Windows 7 internally. And 2008 was a pretty tough year for a lot of businesses, right? So we started laying people off. So suddenly we didn't have any strategy for Windows 7, but 8 weeks to build a strategy and start executing. And my mother came to visit me. So what I did was I created a video of my mother installing Windows 7.
I love it.
And,
I love it.
And I mean, while this is a funny story, it's kind of like think outside the box. So we then presented that video, and basically with the tagline, "It's so easy, Justin's mother can do it," right? So, you send that to 140,000 employees. How do you argue with that? And then we also introduced things like send to a friend, which was interesting because we wanted to see, rather than just be a push mechanism, could we kind of create some level, get us some sense of what pull could look like from within the company? And so I'm not saying it was 100% successful by any means, but it's just, how do you think through these things? It's not always situational. How do we pull out the same tools to fix, a same problem? It's sometimes we'll create a whole new tool. It's kind of what I'm saying here.
How did the send to a friend work out?
We did see people doing it. We actually said, here's introductions on how to sign up, because while most of us are working with a finished product, in my context, we were deploying the technology early on in its life cycle, so it was far from perfect, right? I mean, the product you and I use today, it's gone through many iterations of, very frustrated employees to, what you have today. And by using send to a friend, you're finding people that have, basically like you do in your social media context today, they have similar interests and needs. So we didn't expect everyone to use it, but at different times as we went through the deployment, we would see different people send to a friend network. Because, you had the early adopters, and they're going to send it to all their early adopter mates. Right. Whereas you get kind of the laggards, we knew they were never going to use it, unless it was sent to complain, right? So numbers wise, I can't really quote, or I can't remember to quote, but we definitely saw that happen. And then it becomes also an opportunity in the future. Now you've created potentially a kind of a change network of some sort, right?
Right. That's interesting. Thank you, Justin.
So for our big bad, we're going through our big bad moment right now. we started a modernization effort on our IT systems, and they put the communication cart before the initiative horse. So we were out communicating stuff that, communicating decisions, but there was no vision, there was no strategy behind it. And then now they're trying to scramble in the change management piece. And, there's a lot of rumors happening because the communication wasn't consistent across the board. And so now it's like, hey, Nichelle, can you come clean up the mess, And there were no nuts and bolts to the carriage as it's going down the road. So it's just been breaking apart. And so now I'm trying to, go after the wheels, go after the bolts, go after the siding to bring people back together. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Michelle was talking about that foundation and having, either having the foundation of people or having the data. Justin and Nancy both talked about having that data at the beginning to help you build that vision and strategy out. So we're going back to that place and starting down the road again. And hopefully this time it'll be a much smoother put together process.
Good.
It will be. I have faith.
Nichelle, one thing I think all of us probably have been through similar circumstances where we're brought in, last step, last mile, and trying to pick up the pieces. Something I've found helpful, I'm sure others can contribute to this, is to give people the big context, which is, good for customer, good for partner, good for company or city organization, good for department, good for team, good for individual. And the more you give people a sense of the context, but also their value and the criticality of them, turning the wheel themselves, the more that bigger outcome can be achieved.
Right. Well, the issue that we've had with that is we've said so many times, oh, we're doing this to gain efficiencies or, to be better, to have an improved process, but we've never actually put the metric behind it to show that you're actually gaining efficiencies or that you're actually improving a process. So a lot of our employees are still, not doubting the process, not doubting what leadership is coming out to say, but they're just not as confident as I would like them to be. And so it's, I appreciate the big picture piece, but a lot of them are looking for, okay, how is this affecting me and my job directly? What does that efficiency look like?
No, I respect that.
Yeah.
Sorry. All right, I think this is our last question. What is an invaluable lesson that you've learned throughout your change efforts?
For me, you can plan and you can do. It never is going to guarantee the success.
Yeah.
There's always something new that comes along the way.
I'll say for me, it's that there's always that time where things aren't going to go right and you're not going to know the answer, and to be honest and say you don't, because then you actually have the opportunity then to find someone who might have a good solution and you can find out a better path forward.
Yeah.
I think he's talking, but I can't.
Oh, Justin, are you muted still?
Yeah, I was doing my goldfish impression. Sorry. Yeah, I think for me, and I kind of reiterate a point I made earlier, is that when I sit in a project team, I kind of draw a line, right? And most of the project team is below it because I think they're in the kind of the plumbing of making this kind of systemic change work. And then there are people who sit above the line, are actually kind of facing the audience, so to speak. And I feel I'm that person. I am that audience advocate in, not just the audience advocate out, right? So when you come on the role on a project and you say, yeah, I'm the change management resource. I mean, like I say, you kind of show them all the badges you wear. You're the experienced person. You're the audience advocate. You feel you're a stakeholder on the project, right? I feel even if I maybe don't have the entitlement, I will act as if I have, that I can stop the project, because it just makes no sense to screw up all of that hard work and and kind of kill off a user experience which put all that effort to nothing.
Right. I think for me, one of the most invaluable lessons that I've learned throughout my career is that I myself have to be good at change. I have to be responsive. I have to move on a dime. And that's really hard sometimes. I mean, I like change. I like my days to be different all the time, but I will catch myself throughout a day being frustrated or resistant to something. And I have to remind myself, it's just a change. You're going to be all right, move through it. And so just practicing being very responsive to change is, I think, the most valuable thing I've learned. I would have thought my kids would have taught me that, but I keep learning it through work, right? So, but yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you. That's all been really valuable information, and I think having the different perspectives is really helpful as well on some of these important questions. I know that there are a lot more questions out there from audience members, and so if they are interested in posing those questions now, we definitely have some time for that.
So Justin, I had to show you, I made a little note while you were talking.
Oh, gosh.
There you go. What's good for, the org, for the department, as you go through, what's in it for me and what's good for them. I thought that was really neat. I put it on a sticky note.
Well, good. Yeah. I mean, we're all about, being entitled and tell me why I should change. But it's like, well, if you don't, these bigger things won't happen. And maybe that's a different conversation. But yeah.
Right.
And I didn't come up with that. I learned it from someone else. So, thanks to them.
I liked that.
I was telling a strategy group last week in regards to this modernization, one way that we can engage with our employees a little bit more is to talk about, I don't know if you guys remember a clothing line back in the day, I'm dating myself, but it was called FUBU. It was for us, by us. And it's like, if we create this modernization process, for us, by our employees, that they'll have more of an ownership in the outcome 5 or 10 years down the line. This is going to be a long project. So I want them to own it all the way through.
I like that.
That's very much what the community of practice is all about as well. Is, these are the objectives, this is the vision, now we got to fill in all the blanks.
Right.
We did just have a question come through for everyone. They asked, considering timelines, 3 months to implementation versus 24 months to implementation as an example, what is a good or a bad time frame to consider introducing change management activities?
I like to do change management from the beginning. I think it should be part of the strategy behind the project. I think it needs to be included from the very beginning.
Yep, agree.
Yeah,
That's go ahead, sorry, Justin.
No, I interrupted you, so go ahead.
I think that's one of the reasons why we've extended, as you saw in the slides that I provided, the extension of the business analysts doing change management is they're actually ahead of the strategy, making sure the strategy aligns, where are you, what's happening with that, and then looking at the change impact assessment then of that strategy, iterating that as you get closer to, I'll say, launch day or implementation, whichever you want to call that.
Yeah, I always find it fun having a conversation with teams and going, so when do you want to discuss the end in mind?
Yeah.
Right? You want to have that end in mind discussion at the beginning. And I saw Nancy's slide and I was like, oh, that's amazing. It was like telepathy. Because, I think about, yeah, exactly. Yeah, Seattle. Right? If you see a project charter or a business case, like in my mind, I guarantee you it won't have change on it. I'm pretty much, I'll bet $1 on it, or maybe even $100. Build that slide, right? Talk about the change impact and talk about the kind of the environmental considerations and help people understand, would you buy this change? What would it take for you to buy it? Especially when these are the people going, well, I only want to spend this amount of money on it. And maybe it's for another conversation, but what should the budget be for change management, right? Because I think that's at least a double-digit number of whatever the project cost is. And I think that will bite people in the pants and make them go, hang on a minute, what's this change thing about, right? But again, sorry, I'm taking too much time, but it's got to be a strategic thing.
And I almost wonder, a 3-month project versus 24-month project, clearly you have a lot more time in the 24-month project to do more change management activities, exercises. And I'll ask this question to my co-panelists here. In that 3-month period, are you not taking shortcuts, but being able to address smaller portions of that change process?
In my experience, if the project's only a 3-month project, then it usually has less impact to the organization, or it's a smaller, like it impacts less people, say. So to me, I can adjust my change management, or I can have people adjust their change management strategy around that project, so that it actually, you're not doing everything. You know what I mean? You're doing what you need to do for that project. So it works both ways.
I read the question maybe just a little differently. If you have a project that's there, considering timelines, 3 months to implementation versus 24 months to implementation.
Oh, it could be big.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not so much the timeline of the project, it's more about, should I start change management here or there?
Yeah.
And I think that we've all identified that the change management isn't just to quote the impacted staff. It's setting the right vision. It's setting and casting the right expectations with the steering committee, the leadership, the way that we talk about or design our strategy, and the way that we set up and design the budget request. And that's one of the reasons why when we start to do our baseline requirements, we look at a change impact assessment, the requirements for this, the amount of delta or change that's going to occur, so that we can then stitch that in and it becomes part of the project overall.
Yeah, I agree with all the other points. And I think there are a few organizations that have moved to this new nirvana state of adaptive, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's an opportunity in the future where, a 3-month project is doable because people really lean into change. But the reality is every project today is, I'm going to guess, at least 6+ months, right?
Well,
6+
government
months is probably, low to no change impact, right? Whereas most things are probably 18 months plus. So like, you're changing people's lives. So I think it really comes down to, well, how significant is the change, and how adaptive are the recipients of change? Will a 3-month project actually work?
I feel like the whole reason it goes from a 3-month to a 6-month or longer project is because they didn't have us at the table to begin with.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then you also have to think, we're talking change management from a practitioner's perspective on a project. In the meantime, you still have change management, organizational change management happening throughout the organization. People are learning their roles, you're building up all that competency throughout the organization and things. That's a constant, right? All the time. So I just want to point out there's 2 different things there.
Yeah.
100% agree. Yeah.
That's actually an excellent segue, Michelle, to our next question. We had a comment come in wondering what your recommendations might be around setting up that balance between a centralized office or consulting team that's dedicated change management resources, as opposed to promoting training throughout your organization and building competencies, and what kind of balance do you find successful in that role?
I'd like to take that on as the first thought and welcome others. I believe that it's both. I believe that you need to have a centralized standard group that set what is change management, how are you going to approach it, what are your tools, your models, all the things you're going to do. And then you need to promote training, or I'll say engagement and understanding throughout the organization. It's 2 hands that have to come together. And I think that it's not one or the other from my experience.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree. My example with Microsoft, we created a centralized change management organization because there were some pretty big ticket like changes going on, but we also acknowledged that we couldn't scale to every change. So we created a change management university, if you like.
Mhm.
You kind of go through and basically there was an intake process, and basically as you came through the intake process, it would say kind of you're a high, medium, low. And if you're a low change, you could self-service. We gave you kind of the kit to go self-serve.
Yeah.
We still had governance over when you showed up, so you didn't kind of, torpedo my project. And then if you're medium, we'd offer kind of consultancy light, if you like.
Mhm.
And then if you're high, obviously you got full consultancy.
Yeah.
So, sometimes it's a question of, let's not try and do everything because we want to do everything the same way and do it as if it's high impact. Or you get to a point where you've had enough success that now you're scaling, and then you have to think, how do you scale, right?
And I think for us, it was when we were creating the culture of change, it was important to have both an understanding at the employee level, individual level, but also to have a visual owner and to show the importance of change within the organization. Having that visual office, visual owner was huge in letting employees know that we were serious about having that change culture be prevalent. So starting off, I think it's huge to have that both.
Okay, we have a few more minutes, and I know we do have some announcements, and so if you do have questions, feel free to still chime those in, and we'll get to them if we have time. Something I guess I kind of want to put out there to all of our members and our panelists, maybe just to think about for a topic. If anybody wants to present on this, a question that we often get is around ROI and that return on investment. How do you measure the cost of the change efforts versus that return? And I feel like that is one of those topics that that could be explored further in a full-length presentation. So kind of just want to throw that out there for now. If anybody, please reach out if you would like to present on that in particular, or if you have a good example of tools you use to help with that. So some announcements. Now, I know, Justin, I don't know if this is something that you want to discuss, but the idea of a local chapter.
Sure. Yeah, I had the opportunity to talk to Megan prior to this meeting, and I was just saying, I don't quite know where the kind of the balance of us all are. And I live in Chicago. I'm a bit like Billy No Mates, and I'm like, who else is in Chicago or nearby? And could we get together? Or maybe it's in some other locale. So basically, it's that opportunity to kind of distribute into local chapters that we can then come back to these meetings maybe with more best practices and insight.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's something we could help coordinate via the website.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well. And
okay.
And in fact, I think that's something.
Oh, and I just let the cat out of the bag.
No, that's okay. No, it's great. It's probably a good segue, and that might be something Vivi can speak to actually. But Justin and I also kind of talked about, does it make, if he can experiment with what that local chapter looks like, to be a bit of a pilot, we can help encourage that throughout our other communities. It echoes something I heard Nichelle say today about having that support group and getting energy from the other people who really understand what it is that we do and those challenges and the benefit of it. So another important announcement that we have for you is we have just published our website. Do you want to speak to this?
Sure. So hi everyone, this is Vivi and I'm an intern at CDOT. We, like Megan said, have some exciting news. We have recently created a public sector change practitioners website where we are going to be housing all of the materials associated with PSCP meetings and presentations and resources. So just to give a little quick overview, we have a page where we're going to store presentation recordings, where we're going to have past slide decks, where we're going to put resources that are inserted by all of our members so that other members can access them and start implementing them to change management in their organizations. We also have a live calendar in place where we're hoping to put some change management events or maybe other webinars that people could attend if they're interested in learning more about that. And then there's also going to be a discussion board where people can ask questions, and maybe we can integrate some of those questions into further meetings. So this is what our homepage looks like, and yeah, we're really excited that this is launched and ready to go.
Yes, and Vivi, you guys did an amazing job, and I'd like to say that this is the dedication of our intern team. Shay, who helped Vivi with this, is actually sick today, and she is online watching this webinar right now.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, and I think Vivi ran from her flight that just got in to be here today, and so it's I'm so fortunate that we have such a strong team here. So I think we actually might have one more question.
We did have one more come through. Have any of you had to collaborate with third-party change resources in order to roll out a large-scale change? And can you talk about the effective integration between them and your business?
I can talk about what I'm doing right now. I have both Booz Allen and the Interior Business Center, which is a Department of Interior shared service. Booz Allen has been doing a lot of the analysis and data gathering for our system side of it, and then part of the project management piece. And then IBC, Interior Business Center, I've been working pretty collaboratively with them on building out the change and communication plans. And they actually roll off here at the end of October, so that I can take that process forward. But it's been both of those agencies or organizations.
Well, I've definitely experienced this. I mean, ultimately, you've got to seek partnership. You can work with other parties involved in the delivery of something, and they've all got their scope of work. And, they feel kind of that's their rails they work within. And it's all about them, delivering that and getting paid for it. But equally, partnership is about kind of making those rails not hard, right? So I would, have consistent meetings with them, be reviewing your plan, their plan, seeing how they kind of amplify each other rather than, destruct each other.
Right.
And if you get to that nirvana state where you're part of the business charter and the scope, then even if you divide it out, it's the scope that you're involved in. Quite often it's a bit like, well, there's my scope and your scope, and they're not the perfect match, right? So it's how do you, rather than have them seamlessly match, maybe try and overlap to kind of accommodate that. But yeah, it can be very tricky, but I think just start out with, the partnership, the same goal in mind, and make it very visible, celebrate that partnership.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. We are in our last minute here, so I just want to go ahead and wrap up. I know we have one other announcement that's exciting. Claire has been working on a logo design for us, and she's come up with these 3 options, and we'd like to put that out to the community. So with our follow-up survey that we'll hopefully send later today, you'll see there will be an option to also choose the logo design, as well as some of our traditional questions about what did you think of the webinar. Definitely want your feedback, since we tried something new with the panelists today. So so be looking for that survey. Anything else for the good of the group before we go?
I think it was a great one today, you guys. Good job up there in Denver.
Yeah. Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, thank you to everybody.
And with that,
Yep. All right.
Thank you.
Happy Monday.
Well done, guys. Good job.
Yeah, thank you so much.